This conference will now be recorded.
So this is April. Do you want to give it a couple of minutes till we start recording, since it's not quite 10 o'clock?
Hey, Nick, I think we had a request to hold the recording to start at 10.
Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, everyone. This is Doug Kettles with Clean Cities. We also have the Office of Energy on the line. We'll get started in a minute. We're just going to wait maybe an extra minute or so to allow other people to join us if they're running a little late. Hi, this is Doug Kettles with Central Florida Clean Cities. Thank you for joining us along with the Energy Office for the fifth in a series of webinars that we're holding to gather input for an EV roadmap for the state of Florida. Before we get started, April, would you like to say a few words on the behalf of the Energy Office?
Yes, I would like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. I think this is a webinar that's near and dear to my heart. I think all of them are such important, but having our sister agencies be a part of this conversation and sister agencies that we've worked with and had such a good working relationship with is, very important to us as we move forward in this, because it's going to have to be such a unified effort. Because as we all know, electric vehicle infrastructure is something that is so interconnected that it's not just one responsibility. It's something that we're all going to have to move forward with and work together. So I want to say a big thank you to the agencies involved and being on the phone call today. We really appreciate you.
Well, great. Thank you, April. And, I think you echoed some of our observations too, that this is a cross-cutting issue and it affects the public as well as the state agencies and how they respond and support the state population. So, with that, we have several presenters today. We tried to put together a, excuse me, one second.
I think what Doug was talking about is that we've got some great presenters here today from different agencies. And first up, we have Ben Crawford from the Florida Public Service Commission. Ben is a very smart guy. He's been with the commission for quite some time, and we're lucky to have him here with us to talk about EV infrastructure and what that means for the PSC. So with that, I will turn it over to Ben.
Thanks,
Thank you, April. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, great. Thanks. My name is Ben Crawford. I'm a public utility supervisor in the Office of Industry Development and Market Analysis at the Florida PSC. For those of you who don't know, the Public Service Commission is a legislative agency that regulates utilities, primarily investor-owned utilities, though we do have limited oversight of municipal and cooperative electric utilities. My section primarily deals with policy issues, including electric vehicles, but we also deal with things like the nuclear and storm protection cost recovery clauses. We also track legislative and executive agency or activity at both the state and federal levels. The PSC first became involved with EVs back when we put together a legislatively mandated report on EVs and their effect on the electric grid back in 2012. For that report, the PSC held a public workshop, and we incorporated input from numerous stakeholders in the EV industry, ranging from auto manufacturers, charging companies, and a bunch of other related groups. We delivered that report to the legislature and to the governor's office at the end of 2012, which is when it was due. The conclusions we reached in that report were that EV charging was expected to have a negligible effect on electric consumption in Florida within the 10-year planning horizon we were using them through the end of 2021. EVs were also not expected to cause a significant increase in electrical demand or contribute significantly to a need for new generation until well past 2021. Clusters of electric vehicles charging simultaneously on a single residential transformer was kind of seen as one of the biggest short-term risks. It could potentially require upgrades to the transformer, but individual vehicles were not expected to affect the distribution system. Quick charge stations, the big level 3 stations, which we didn't have any of in Florida at the time yet, they were seen as posing the potential challenges as the biggest potential challenges for the distribution system. In 2017, we did an update to the 2012 report, and what we found was the market for all electric and for plug-in hybrid vehicles was expanding, with more car manufacturers offering more models for purchase, but we still see it as sort of a niche market representing a small percentage of total vehicles sold each year. Therefore, EV charging was not expected to have a material impact on the demand for electricity or contribute significantly to a need for new generation through the current planning cycle at the time, which was 2028. It also found no reported power outage caused by the operation of EV charging station in Florida at the time, and I think we still haven't had any report of anything along those lines. Now, despite that sort of negligible impact we've seen on the grid at present, we still see EVs as potentially an important part of the growth of electric demand and our projections for that demand going forward. With wide enough adoption, EVs have the potential for a significant effect on electric demand, but this impact on electric demand is largely dependent on how extensively they are adopted. That said, Section 366.94 Florida statutes exempts EV charging from being considered a sale of electricity, and thus the PSC has no direct jurisdiction over EVs or EV charging. With this PSC, the way that we primarily regulate sales of electricity. I mean, we have some oversight of safety and reliability as well as electricity sales, but whether we regulate a particular electric transaction is usually whether it's considered a sale of electricity for purposes of Chapter 366 Florida statutes, and EVs are specifically exempted from that. We're still monitoring EV adoption for its effect on electric demand and electric reliability, however, because those, of course, do fall within our jurisdiction. In addition to the potential for EVs to drive demand growth in the future, EVs could affect reliability, both from EV home chargers overloading a residential, from EV home chargers overloading a residential transformer to DC fast charging to public charging station, placing a very high load on the system. Those can have something like, I think those start around 50 kilovolts and or kilowatts and can go from there. The key will be having accurate projections of the increase in load so utilities can build to meet demand, whether we're talking about the need for additional generation or more robust distribution system. Utilities need to be able to track and plan for the deployment of charging facilities so they can plan in response. With sufficient planning, utilities in the PSC should be able to ensure that Florida can meet any generation demands placed on the grid by EVs, ensuring that the state can maintain reliability and safety standards. Related to any upcoming studies, one particular challenge the PSC has faced has been obtaining reliable numbers on the number of plug-in EVs in Florida. The tracking that's done at a state agency level it involves self-reporting, and it doesn't differentiate between non-plug-in hybrids like a Prius that doesn't actually draw any energy from the grid, or the plug-in hybrids, or the full plug-in electrics, or even the electric golf carts. And so that's made it a little difficult for us to get reliable numbers. At the same time, reliable projections for future growth have also been a challenge. When we take the report we did in 2012, even the most conservative projections of EV growth from that report expected twice as many EVs on the road as we found in 2017 when we did that report. And as a result, we're a little uncertain of the reliability of the projections we've been getting out of these reports, just because growth has been a little bit slower than expected.
Oh, Amy, my name is Eric Hill. I'm with MetroPlan Orlando. I called and left a message. I tried to leave a message yesterday for Eric Gray regarding a grant opportunity that we're pursuing, and we are inviting the Christian Services Center to partner with us on the grant application.
Yes, I'm sorry, sir.
I had a previous conversation with Eric prior to him joining your agency about this, and he expressed an interest, but I wanted to reconnect with him.
Is happening. Thank you, Nick.
I think this is a good reminder for everyone besides Ben to mute their phones. Thank you.
Ben, you want to continue? Right. Sorry for the interruption there.
It's okay. It happens. I've been on a number of these calls. It's hard to avoid that completely.
Okay.
Anyway, I did. We'll just checking where I left off. Additionally,
you're talking about the difficulty with projections.
Yeah. I mean, what we found is that more aggressive growth was expected in Florida. I think one of the problems that we've had to a certain extent is that a lot of the projections have been based on the rate of EV adoption in California, because that's where we had the best data going on, and it's just been slower in the rest of the country because California has incentives in place that just simply aren't available anywhere else. But it's an ongoing process trying to get those numbers because they're so critical to us making the projections we need to make. But we also, the PSC would benefit from better data on clustering, having multiple EVs in a small location to better determine how much of a potential challenge for reliability it is and how much it might become in the future. One of the potential areas where we're most likely to see an impact on the electric grid is in areas with high concentration of EVs. Also, the effect on overall energy consumption is a key part of why EVs are so significant to the mission of the PSC, despite our lack of direct jurisdiction over them. EVs represent one of the technologies that will affect the growth of electric demand in the future. Electric demand growth has actually been falling on a per customer basis in Florida for some time now, with the growth in demand primarily being driven by population growth. However, large-scale adoption of EVs could potentially reverse that trend. I mean, it's a large appliance essentially from looking at it from a power demand standpoint, and this could potentially drive a need for new generation beyond that currently expected. It'd be something akin to when air conditioning suddenly became widespread, and so you had this additional large appliance all over the place that was driving a lot of electric demand in Florida. Senate Bill 7018, which was recently passed by the Florida legislature but has yet to be signed by the governor, assigns the PSC some duties as well related to an upcoming report to be developed by the Florida Department of Transportation in consultation with the Office of Energy. The PSC will have to project the increase in the use of EVs over the next 20 years, determine how to ensure an adequate supply of reliable EV charging stations, evaluate current and potential future EV charging technology, consider strategies to develop the supply of charging stations, determine the regulatory structure to best assist EV charging and EV charging infrastructure, and review emerging technologies in the EV and alternative fuel vehicle market. The collaboration on this report has not launched yet, though I think we have our first call this afternoon, actually. But fortunately, it would seem the work that y'all at the Energy Office are doing on the EV roadmap may have given us all a head start in trying to meet this legislative obligation. In short, the primary reason that the PSC is tracking the growth of EVs is for their potential impacts on grid reliability and safety. With sufficient planning, there's every reason to think that utilities will be able to meet their demands without compromising either of those important factors of reliability and safety. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions when we come around to it.
Well, thank you, Ben. And Jennifer Fortunis is with the Florida Department of Transportation. Jennifer, you're on, aren't you?
Yes, I am on.
Okay. Would you like to tell us a little more about yourself and what y'all do in your office at FDOT and just kind of the perspective of FDOT for on electric transportation now? But thank you for
Sure.
joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Jennifer Fortunis. I am the Forecasting and Trends Office Manager, and the Florida Department of Transportation provides transportation improvements and infrastructure for the state of Florida. We are primarily following the Federal Highway Administration's lead. FDOT developed and submitted to FHWA an alternative fuels corridor nomination package where we're proposing to designate within Florida portions of the interstate system and Florida's turnpike as either corridor ready or corridor pending. And we recognize the need to be involved with and planning for EVs and how they operate on our state transportation infrastructure. We're looking to take best practices and lessons learned from other state DOTs who have already begun to plan for EV infrastructure. We also are going to rely on public-private partnerships, which are key to getting our state highway system EV ready. Our private partners will most likely be the ones designing, maintaining, and implementing successful EVSE deployments, including the transit agencies. It is important to encourage implementation of public or open charging infrastructure for all makes and models of electric vehicles. And as the market adoption of electric vehicles grow, having adequate charging stations in our rural areas of the state will be necessary. And this is particularly true during emergency evacuations. And this is something where the department can provide some support, guidance, and best practices and other resources to help fill in these gaps, connecting the major urban areas of our state. So electric vehicle supply equipment supports all objectives of our mission statement, which is to provide a safe transportation system that ensures the mobility of people and goods, enhances economic prosperity, and preserves the quality of our environment and communities. FDOT looks to have the vital few, which is improve safety, enhance mobility, and inspire innovation. And we have already been and will continue to monitor our and evaluate emerging technologies, including automated, connected, electric, and shared mobility. We need to also consider the impacts to the State Transportation Trust Fund. This is very important because Florida transportation is funded primarily through the gas tax. And so the department will need to work with our partners and lawmakers to help set up a backstop for the loss in gas tax. It means having conversations and being open-minded about usage fee or some type of fee that will fill in that hole so that we can continue to provide sustainable revenue generation for our State Transportation Trust Fund so that we can invest in our transportation infrastructure. And yes, Ben, we do have a meeting this afternoon, so we will be working with the Public Service Commission and the Office of Energy on the electric vehicle master plan, and we should be kicking that off shortly.
Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer, and we'll get back with you and Ben in a little bit when we start the topic discussions. But we also have Debbie Bass from the Florida Division of Emergency Management. Debbie's a senior analyst there. Debbie, can you tell us a little bit about your division? And I think we all are really happy for what you do. And I know you've been very busy lately, but as far as EVs and infrastructure go, can you fill us in a little bit on that? And then I think you also are going to ask Andrew Sussman to speak a little bit about the evacuations that happen in Florida.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, I'm the Emergency Coordinating Officer for Emergency Support Function 12 Fuels in the State Emergency Operations Center here. We respond to energy shortages for transportation fuels and propane. Initially, we were set up to support petroleum products, but over the years, we've started branching out to include alternate fuels. And during an energy shortage or fuel shortage, we monitor power outages to understand those shortages. And basically, we get that information from Emergency Support Function 12 Power, Ben's group on his side, and we try to have the pulse of all transportation fuels coming in and out of the state. We monitor the ports. We try to look at the overall picture of everything that's going on. Currently, our fuels planner, Nikolai Mudro, is working with individual counties to assess their fuel needs and assist them in creating a more robust emergency fuel plan for their county. Also, part of our team is Jimmy Nguyen, our alternate emergency coordinating officer. And specifically in regards to electrical vehicles, we have obtained the U.S. Department of Energy, EIA fueling locations and have those available to share with anybody during an activation. And we work closely with Department of Agriculture. They are tremendous as part of our team in responding to fuel emergencies. But I wanted to shift gears over to Andrew Sussman, who's our Hurricane Program Manager, to talk about evacuations and how those happen.
Thank you for your time. So in speaking to some of the evacuations we've had over the last couple of years, as you've seen, we've had some very large-scale evacuations, and we're always trying to find ways to how can we reduce the size of the unnecessary evacuating population. We've had a strategy for years called Know Your Zone. We are actually evolving that because of the hurricanes for the last few years. We're actually studying the effectiveness of Florida Building Code. So we're actually evolving that message to Know Your Zone, Know Your Home. Evacuation orders are generally issued by our counties. There's several situations that are usually ordered to evacuate in a hurricane. We have evacuation zones along the coast. Some inland counties do have this as well, but all of our coastal counties generally have zones for storm surge. That's the abnormal rise of water created by a hurricane. Water from the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean can get pushed on land and sometimes very far, depending on how devastating the hurricane can be. The second situation that's usually ordered to evacuate is low-lying flood-prone areas due to heavy rainfall and riverine flooding. And the third situation is mobile homes and unsafe structures for the potential of high wind and debris. For years, we've always advocated if you're in an evacuation order, you must evacuate. If you do evacuate, please only go tens of miles, not hundreds of miles. Try to find, we also use the phrase, you only have to run from the water. You can hide from the wind, so it's finding a safe structure outside of the evacuation orders. We have encouraged in the past the use of real-time GPS software, real-time that shows real-time traffic congestion. So even if you know where you're going, during those evacuations, you'll see significant congestion. So those technologies might actually put you on a faster road that you're not used to taking. So we've said it in the past, but we're really trying to evolve the message now. If you are not in the evacuation orders that I just mentioned, the zones for storm surge, low-lying flood-prone areas, mobile homes and unsafe structures, if you're in a well-built structure outside of the areas being ordered to evacuate and that structure is mitigated for the high wind and debris, there's some type of window and door protection, the homeowner has done their homework, so to speak, on the home, it's built after a certain year. Florida Building Code was adopted in 2002. It's only been made stronger. So the newer the home is in relation to Florida Building Code, the better the chance that it has the requirements to be a safe place to stay for a hurricane. We are partnering with FLASH, the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes. There's a website people can go to learn more how to make their home a safer place to stay. It's flash.org/hurricane-strong. Once again, that's flash.org/hurricane-strong, or you can just Google Flash and Hurricane Strong and probably find the webpage. So, as said, all coastal counties have evacuation zones, and just a handful of counties inland, like portions of Leon County, for example, down in the southern area, like Woodville, is an evacuation zone. So, with that, I will take any questions if there are any.
Okay, well, thank you, Andrew. That is really good information. I think we'll do a kind of a deeper dive into that, but thanks for bringing us up to speed to Andrew and Debbie. So what we'll do now, as soon as my computer responds, there we go, is move on to the discussion topics. And what we're going to do now is we'll go through these again, maybe dive into them in a little bit deeper level. And then in the last 30, 20 minutes or so of the webinar, we'll open up for general questions. If you have a question that is pertaining to any of these particular topics, feel free to once the conversation starts, engage yourself someplace in it, and because we would like this to be an interactive experience. It's not really blocked off so that people just speak during these periods of time. So we're going to have hopefully an open discussion on this, and we'll start with the agency perspectives on electric transportation. I think what I heard, we had representatives from the Public Service Commission, from the Department of Transportation, and then from the Department of Emergency Management. What I heard across the board is that electric transportation is already something that they're contemplating and also planning for. And I think that kind of brings to the forefront the fact that this topic has been simmering in the background, and as the prices of these vehicles drop and they reach a price parity with conventionally fueled vehicles, we're going to see more and more of them. So now is really our opportunity to understand what's going to go on, to refine some of the forecasting that we've been using in the past, and see if we can prepare for the event for when these vehicles do start to appear in significant amounts, and so that we don't overload either the grid or the infrastructure for electric transportation. So so I think we've heard from everyone that yes, this is something they are working on, and then we've also heard from Ben and Jennifer, and maybe Debbie mentioned it too, that there are going to be other efforts in this area that are going to be carried out under another piece of legislation, and that the Public Service Commission and the FDOT and the Energy Office are all going to collaborate and really take what we're doing and maybe add a couple of layers to it. We're principally concerned with what the physical layer infrastructure looks like, what it should look like, and how it will operate. And I think that we'll provide useful information to those other agencies and divisions and to help them do their work. So, having said that, I have kind of an open question for all of the agencies, and how does I think the Department of the Department of Transportation is currently using electric vehicles, and I know they're installing infrastructure. So maybe if we could have a perspective on from from these departments and agencies about are they adopting electric transportation? Do they want to adopt electric transportation, and what are they doing to to make that happen? So if you don't mind, Jennifer, I know that y'all are installing EVSE. Can you give us a little bit of insight on that?
I am going to defer to Tanner. Martin, do you have a little info on where and how we're installing some EVSE?
Sure, Jennifer, I'd be happy to. Thank you. There are some district offices that are starting to install EVSE. That would be publicly available at their district offices. There is discussion right now at a central office to install some EVSE. Right now, there are some hurdles for installing EVSE at some of our rest areas. And there's discussion about the co-location of EVSE at park and rides. Nothing definitive yet. It's all just now being discussed, really. But where we can and where it's determined to be beneficial for filling in some of the gaps along the state highway system, that's exactly what this future endeavor and plan will address. And there is consideration for some of the hybrids. We do have some of those in our fleet. I'm not aware of any full electric, battery electric vehicles in the FDOT fleet, but there has been consideration for that.
Yeah, and it all depends
right now.
Yeah, and it all depends on your duty and drive cycle too. So, electric vehicles don't fit every duty and drive cycle, and so, they need to be thoroughly investigated as to how much utility they will get, because if you don't utilize the vehicle, you won't see a return on your investment in it. So, just going to, toss that out there. And also, I do know that that FDOT has an ACES subcommittee or an ACES committee, which is automated, connected, and electric transportation, and they meet regularly. And then also FDOT also is very, very involved in the Florida Autonomous or Florida's Automated Vehicles Summit that they hold annually sometime either before or after Thanksgiving, and they hold those in different places in the state. That one will be this year's, if we're able to have it, will be in the Orlando area. So FDOT is very involved in this and has been for a long time. I've worked with Tanner and with Ed Hutchinson on the alternative fuel corridors, and FDOT has a very forward-looking perspective on electric transportation and alt fuel transportation. So we're really happy to have them as partners. Debbie, Ben, do you have any comments there? Or?
This is Ben. We have a very limited fleet. I mean, we have a handful of field engineers, and but other than that, I think we have maybe, I'd be surprised if we had a dozen cars. Okay. And they're mainly just used for remote meetings. We do have EV charging available at the commission. We do, at least when we were working there, we usually had some cars plugged into it, but they're just people's personal cars. I could see in the future making an effort to replace the new cars with EVs, but there hasn't been. To be honest, I'm not sure. I think the newest car is about 5 years old, so I'm not sure when they last went through purchasing. They were widely available at the time, especially the specs that we needed. But I'm not aware of anything going on at the agency. But like I said, we don't have much of a fleet, so it's less of an issue with us, I think, than it is with some of the larger agencies.
Yeah, well, thank you. And that's part of this discussion is to hopefully elevate the visibility and well, one of the things that I've heard is that I think we need to have a few more electric vehicles on the state's bid list. And but that's not what we're here for. We're here for the infrastructure. So the point of fact is all the agencies are definitely engaged with electric transportation and do see that it's going to, ultimately it's going to comprise a significant portion of our transportation environment. So, Debbie, did you have anything that you'd like to add, or should we go ahead and move on?
Well, I just was going to mention we currently don't have any emergency management electrical vehicles, but that's all I have to say.
Okay. Well, and one of the things that will come out of all of this discussion and the reports and recommendations that are being supplied is the use of electric vehicles for emergency power situations. And there is a lot of opportunity there, especially with the larger batteries that are in the vehicles now. An electric school bus on average has a 160 kilowatt battery in it. And, we have 10 or 15 kilowatts, maybe 20 kilowatts worth of solar on a particular building that is used for, let's say, emergency purposes. Well, right there, that one bus has, 15, 16 times the power capacity and a much longer duration than the existing emergency power. So there's huge potential and upside for using these vehicles in emergency management. One of the things I heard when we were discussing, yeah.
Oh, we have some questions on coming from the chat room, and I was wondering if we could get to those real quick.
Yeah, sure.
They come, following up on some of the discussions. There's some questions about 7018 and and how information is going to be coordinated to the public. And I would say that that's a good question, and it's probably going to be a little bit of a TBD. Governor DeSantis still hasn't signed that bill. So I know for the Office of Energy, that's something that we, haven't looked at, but I know that once the governor signs that bill, we are more than happy to do our part to work with our sister agencies, the PSC and DOT, to complete the requirements of that bill. And there was a follow-up question to the previous question, and please, jump in, Jennifer and Ben, if you have something to add to that. But there was a mention of a meeting today, and folks were interested in if there was going to be information, kind of relayed from that meeting. And if you would like to say anything as a follow-up to that, I'll turn that over to you.
This is Jennifer. I'll just say that this is our initial introduction meeting to start discussing how we're going to work together to complete the items in the bill. So I echo what you said, April. It's still up in the air to be determined, but we do plan on working with you and PSC and coming up with how we're going to get public input and stakeholder coordination.
Yeah, this is Ben, and I would echo that. This is really just touching base and identifying who the contact people are going to be. I think more than anything else, we haven't. I would be surprised if we really get into process in any significant way this early, especially with the bill not signed. What we really need to just do is start touching base and get the logistics out of the way before we can start making any material decisions about some of these things. I would anticipate there will be opportunities for public comment down the line when the PSC has done our past EV studies. We've held public workshops for them, and so I would anticipate something is made available at least with us for the public to comment and for people to weigh in, possibly even present publicly, just depending on how that ends up happening.
And I would just kind of jump in and say that I would assume that everything, not assume that that everything would be, follow the letters of, our public meetings and would be noticed like we've been noticing in the FAW, and that we would do everything that we need to do to get this information out in a very public and transparent manner.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say definitely.
Okay.
Agree. Thank you.
And then kind of following up on that, and I'm going to say, Ben, this one is for you. In terms of the PSC's interest in EVs, particularly as it relates to challenges that concentrated EVs charging may pose to the grid, has the PSC given thought to working with utilities to manage the charging both through the rate design and by leveraging smart technology?
We've had some pilot programs along those lines. The way the PSC usually operates, unless we get specific legislation dictating that there's something we're required to do, it's rare that we'll initiate a program unless we see some specific something that falls specifically within our legislative agenda or our legislative dictate. We will rarely, absent legislation, we are a legislative agency. We don't answer to the executive branch, but to the legislature directly. We will rarely just take something up of our own cognizance. Now, that said, we have had utilities come to us with these things, and we've always considered them when they come through. Like I said, there have been some pilots in that regard. What we have been, and there's also some simply existing structures, things like time of use rates that would be particularly well suited for EV use that we've that have been around for a while. I'm not ruling out that we would be reaching out to utilities to come up to encourage them to come up with plans, but for the most part, we just, because of the nature of our authority, we tend to be more reactive in that regard than aggressive in coming up with programs and imposing them on utilities. It's simply the nature of kind of where our jurisdiction lies.
All right, great answer. And I think this next one is a little bit for all of us, that it, is asking for a bit of a clarification for our roles. And this kind of goes back to what I said earlier, is that EVs and the infrastructure and the planning is complicated. This one says, can someone, please confirm that EV planning issues are being coordinated by the State Energy Office, which then loops in other state agencies as needed, such as FDOT and the PSC. And to that, I would say it's a lot more complicated than that, because as you know, FDOT handles a lot of the planning issues, and there's issues that you have on the local levels, as well as, the grid issues, electric grid issues, which then the PSC, regulates. So, and where you have energy policy issues, which is where the Energy Office comes into it. So there's an emergency management and evacuation routes is where DEM comes in. So everybody has a little bit, big pieces of the puzzle, but where we all have to work together in a unified way to accomplish a goal. And I would like to hear, FDOT's and PSC's and DEM's thoughts on this as well.
This is Ben. I'll weigh in. We don't have, I would say, a regular coordinating group or anything like that. We've come together, when we have something we have to work on together. When the other agencies are taking any kind of action, we try to keep an eye on it. We try to have a representative on it if it's appropriate. And and we try to generally see what the other agencies are doing with it, especially to the extent that it might affect the issues that are under our jurisdiction. Absent something, central that's organizing it, something like like Senate Bill 7018, something like the roadmap calls we've been having for a while. There's not usually anything formal that I've observed going on between the agencies, but we usually, when there's a specific purpose, we're usually quite good about working together as we need to get whatever it is done. And like I said, we do. We try to track what other agencies are doing, just so that we keep up and informed on it, and we know if something is going to affect EVs on the whole, or even just our particular corner of them, that we like to be aware of it. So.
This is Jennifer. Yes, we are very similar in that we do try to track what other agencies are doing, and this new Senate bill will provide an opportunity to coordinate amongst all the players. April's right in that it's very complex, and there's everyone has a piece of the overall puzzle to put it all together. So that's pretty much my thought.
That's why we're having so many webinars. Let me make sure that I've gotten and addressing all the comments from our chat group, but here's one that's interesting. Is the state emergency management considering solar EV chargers for emergency power? And that is something that Doug and I have been talking about, because I think this is a tremendous opportunity that we as the state can use, and are looking at something as a pilot project. But I know some of our cities and counties here in the state of Florida have already looked at some of this technology. So Debbie, if you want to talk about this, or if there's anybody from the city or the county who's already looked into this, if you would like to jump in on this question, please do so.
I just wanted to say that when we're responding to emergencies, we are here at the state level to support the counties and the cities if they exceed their capability. And typically we go through our vendors to provide that support on a short term.
We don't hear it.
Oh, are you not hearing me?
No, you sound great. I think somebody else wasn't muted, so please go ahead, Debbie.
You seem to be breaking up.
So
okay.
Basically, the support that we provide is over that period of time that is needed, whether it be for a hurricane or a pandemic or a fire or whatever event we're supporting. We typically go through our vendors and provide the support that the counties are requesting, because it exceeds their capability. So that's just kind of how we play in. And then when we are unable to provide the support and we need to go outside of our jurisdiction, we then go to the federal level asking for that support from FEMA. And so that's kind of how things work in the emergency management arena. We have received quotes on solar capabilities. Of what she's question comes down to, we don't, as far as I'm aware, currently own that type of equipment. We have our offices here. We have lots of offices out over the state. We're not, and we have our SLRC in Orlando that we have equipment and resources go to, and then go out from there to where the emergency is. But currently, as far as I'm aware, we have not used solar yet in that type of situation, but we have received quotes from vendors on resources. And if that's something that was rentable, available, I've gotten a quote to purchase, not a quote to rent for the period of time that we would need it. So that's kind of how I perceive it. But again, things change as emergencies always are consistently changing. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, well, and thank you. And I'll add, this is Doug, I'll add a little bit of something else to it. I mean, April and I were discussing this, and certainly we see it as a possibility, a short-term fix for the need for temporary EV charging in an emergency situation. But we also see this as not being a stranded asset and only being used during an emergency situation. What we've looked at is for determining where to put infrastructure, you can place these portable EV chargers. They basically are self-contained to a large degree. They can connect to the grid or they can operate independently. They have battery storage in them, significant battery storage. And but the other use of them is to determine the feasibility for putting in hardwired, expensive permanent assets. So you take one of these out there, you say, this looks like, we think this is an area that would need an EV charging station. You can place this out there on a temporary basis, monitor its utilization, and either confirm or not, you know, the assumptions that you were using about, is this a, you know, a good location for an EV charger? So they have great emergency potential, but they also have some very good planning potential too going forward in their ability to be moved around and just kind of sample EV utilizations for a particular area. So so yeah, it's promising, it's interesting, and we can see what happens. Anybody else have anything else on that? April, do you want to continue with the chats?
I've got one more from the chat, and then we can get to the list.
Okay.
All right, and this is about, Jennifer, this one's for you. It's about new toll roads, and these toll roads being touted as providing new evacuation routes. And will you please speak to how this possibility may affect state plans for EV infrastructure, and how DOT views this as a priority for EV infrastructure?
Certainly. So this is referring to the multi-use corridors of regional significance. And as we develop these corridors, they essentially are a blank slate to put in infrastructure that will support EV, autonomous, and connected vehicles. It's one of the major areas that these corridors will be focusing on, so that we have more options during hurricane evacuation and other emergency evacuations, as well as the movement of freight through our region. So I would say it's a priority when looking at these new corridors.
Yeah, and I can add a little bit about that. I've been on 2 or 3 panels with FDOT on these corridors, and they are huge opportunities for us to deploy not only EV infrastructure, but telecommunications infrastructure that and infrastructure for autonomous vehicles. And it's just really exciting to have these greenfield opportunities to really build state-of-the-art transportation facilities, much like the state is doing with SunTrax, which is a new facility over in Orlando. So, okay. Well, let's go on to the list here for a couple of minutes, and then we can return to the chat. You know, one of the things under, and we're going to roll through these pretty quickly because we're coming down to about a half an hour left. One of the things that I heard was the difficulty in finding accurate information, and most interestingly, the fact that it's really difficult to determine how many EVs are out there. And I think it was Andrew that put his finger on the dot and saying that it's the way we enroll these vehicles in the DMV. And there is visibility there, and you can find this information, but you do have to dig really deep and go through a lot of filtering. And you know, I personally have done it in the past, and it's very challenging to actually get the count for the light duty vehicles that are on the road, because you will have off-road vehicles mixed in there. And then, as I mentioned, you have, you know, hybrids, which don't plug in to the grid, and then you have hybrids that do plug into the grid. So that is challenging, and I think we have a handle on that. We will be able to provide some clearly useful information as far as EV counts and such as that go. But are there any other ways that these agencies could, you know, we could support them? Is there other information that would be helpful that you find difficult to find? And that applies also to the audience out there. So, you know, we're not a data warehouse, so to speak, but we do talk to people, and we do know where to find things, and a lot of times. So is there anything, you know, Ben, Jennifer, or Debbie, that, you know, would be helpful to you in what you're doing to support EV, electric transportation?
This is Ben. The numbers, if those numbers are there, I think that would be one of the main things we could, that y'all could do, would be just if we get those numbers on a regular basis. We do the 10-year site planning process and we'll usually address EVs in there every year, which is just sort of, this is the things that are going to be emerging over the next 10 years, generation that we plan on coming in. This is where we anticipate need for new infrastructure or what have you. And as part of that process, if we get reliable numbers every year, I know that would be very helpful to us. It may just be a matter of knowing who, how to get those numbers, which is something that I think escaped us up until now.
Okay, well, on Drive Electric Florida's website, we update those numbers on a quarterly basis. We don't go into a lot of detail, but we just basically every quarter we update the total count. Right now, the total count is sitting a little over 60,000 by the way we determine it, and we think that's an accurate representation. So, but we'll work towards sharing that information with others.
Well, thank you.
Any?
Doug, just because there's some questions about this on the chat. So I know from the Office of Energy, when we request that information, we get it from the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. How are you getting your information? If you can say, because I know that's the state agency that's charged with registrations.
Well, basically, you get a data dump from the Department of Motor Vehicles. You go through and do some filtering using VIN numbers that are specific to a particular model of vehicle. And you really kind of go from there. Then, let's say that you've gotten it zeroed in on a particular.
To change it in any way besides doing a full data dump, which is very time consuming for the person doing it. It would be a legislative change to do that. I know I've written a proposal for it, and it's quite the ask, but it's something that, we can continue to, make the ask for. So, data dumps are necessary, and I think it's knowing and working together and knowing the right things to ask for, what's going to be best for the industry folks, as well as what's needed, not for just, maybe EVs, but like, CNG, everybody, and we can go and make that ask again. And that's where we need to be, working together.
Yeah, April, this is Jennifer. I think this is a huge opportunity for our agencies to kind of approach DHSMV and kind of say, this is the data that's really useful for us. Can we work something out where we can be getting this data? It's a good opportunity.
Yeah, a standardized approach, so to speak. With that way, everybody's looking at the same numbers too. So.
Agreed. I think that's something that could be really helpful for state agencies and the industries, utilities, everyone.
Yeah. We'll work on that, and I'm optimistic about it. So, I mean, not from a legislative point of view or a rulemaking point of view, but I think we can get to those numbers. So, let's see here. Let's see, and I see Susanna's comments there. Are recording my, okay, those have
Rest all of them. If not,
okay.
Please let us know.
Right.
There's one more that was a follow-up for you, Jennifer, about the toll roads and if EV infrastructure would have higher priority on the toll roads or on existing roads.
I believe that, when we're looking at the MCORs, because it is sort of a blank slate, it will be easier to put in the EV infrastructure, but that doesn't mean that it's more of a priority. I think as we're looking at the state, we want to fill in any gaps to connect the major urban areas. So whether it's on the new corridor or existing state highway system, it's really going to be based on how do we fill the gap.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, we have several other topics here. We're just under a half an hour. I think what we should do is, if you do have a question, please enter it in the chat box, and then I think Nick recommended you make it to everyone. That way, the speakers and presenters and everyone will have a chance to look at the question. But I think we talked a significant amount about emergency management, and through the discussion about the EV counts and some of the other, we've covered the resources and technical challenges. The introduction of EVs and autonomous transportation services, that is only going to increase the load. I mean, the commonly accepted wisdom is that EVs or autonomous vehicles will be EVs. I mean, there's going to be some of them that will that won't be, but there'll be more in, let's say, in a manufacturing setting or something to the effect of doing excavation work. Those vehicles can all be autonomous. When it comes to passenger vehicles, this is going to have a huge impact on electric transportation. And again, it's simply because it's the logical platform for autonomous transportation. You're building, these are technology deployments, and you're building a lot of technology into that platform. You don't want to have to build two platforms, one for conventionally fueled vehicles and one for electric vehicles if you don't have to. So it seems to be the natural progression that we will see EVs, and they will be largely autonomous, and they will also, definitely increase the load. And from an infrastructure point of view, we have to be looking at them as wireless opportunities, either probably in a static environment where you would pull into, say, a service plaza on the turnpike, and you would have wireless power transfer, that you pull your vehicle into a parking spot and it would charge wirelessly while you went inside and got a refreshment or do whatever you needed to do, and then come back out and then continue on your trip. So it doesn't require the plugging in of a cable. And when you get into that autonomous environment, then you're also talking about the car being able to negotiate a spot anytime with the charging infrastructure, so that you pull in there, you've got that spot reserved for you, you do your charging, and then you move on out. And or if you're done and if the car is charged and we're not quite ready to leave, then this autonomous vehicle simply backs itself out, parks itself in a regular parking spot, and then the next car pulls in and charges. So there's a ton of potential here, and a lot of challenges, as everybody has already said. And so, if anybody has any questions or any comments on the remaining topics there, like zoning and building, permitting considerations, any of the other, the social equity in the underserved communities, anything there that folks would like to speak about. I think we've got a couple, don't we? Let's see here.
David, is there something that you'd like to add?
Alternative fueled. Hey, David. Hey, David Dunn, are you there? Let's see.
That means away from keyboard for 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Need a brush up on
Okay, and we did get and this is great. This is why we do this. I mean, Justin Wilson sent us, Colorado Energy Office has recently started hosting a dashboard to track data on electric vehicles, which I believe is a great example of the type of info that can be helpful to agencies, advocates, and policymakers. And he has a link there, and we'll include that in our notes that will be posted on the Energy website. So thanks, Justin. And then Pete Westlake is saying, and which I knew, that they also do a pretty accurate count, and I think they actually compare numbers with other folks to make sure that their data is correct for EVs in Florida. So anybody else want to chime in, have anything? Well, April, I mean, with that, I can talk forever. But I think, maybe we'll call this one a little bit early. We've done that before. Hopefully it's been very helpful. I think it has. It's been a great conversation. would any of our speakers or our facilitators or April, would any of y'all like to add anything? I guess not.
Well, I'll just thank our facilitators for joining us today and giving those thoughtful comments and answering all our questions. And then thank all our participants for joining and then asking thoughtful questions.
Really, well, thank you.
Because we couldn't do it without anyone.
Yeah, really. And again, it's you know, it's always been very helpful. So next week, same time, same location, we'll be engaging with the planning community for the MPOs, TPOs, and all of those folks who, you know, look out into the future and see what it is that we're going to need. So if you could join us next week on Tuesday the 16th at 10:30, we would certainly appreciate it. Having said that, there's our contact information. And I know April is always available at the Energy office also. So with that, we'll end the webinar. Thank you for taking the time to attend and for, you know, your input and your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.